What have been some of the ecosystem highlights for you in 2025 so far?
Sei is the largest gaming chain by a wide margin, more so than Ethereum, a lot of much larger ecosystems.
Why do you think that you have such a kind of advantage or clutch for new retail users, particularly in the gaming ecosystem?
We believe that the core value prop of crypto is trading and exchanging digital assets, some sort of financial transaction. Cheap, fast, and secure. That's it.
Well, joining me to talk all things Sei ecosystem, we have Jeff, the co-founder of Sei Labs. Jeff, thank you for joining today on what is a really busy week, so I really appreciate you taking the time. How are you doing?
No, I appreciate you taking the time, and these kind of meetings and interviews, it's almost like you have to, the stars need to align to make sure the schedules come in place, so I'm stoked for this.
Exactly, and I'm thrilled that we're able to get you in the hot seat and talk all things kind of Sei ecosystem as we are in 2025, and we're winding down, moving into 2026. What a year it has been, and I'm curious to ask you as the co-founder of Sei Labs, what have been some of the ecosystem highlights for you in 2025 so far?
Yeah, I mean, if I had to rewind all the way to the beginning of the year, what has been the strategy that the foundation and the labs team and the big bets that they've taken, how did those bets and how they really panned out so far? I'd say a couple of the big highlights, latest and greatest. For every L1, especially ones that want to become that sort of next Ethereum, next Solana.
Yeah.
The name of the game is one, really win over just the core user base, core consumers, people that sometimes don't even know what crypto is.
Yeah.
So Sei is the largest gaming chain by a wide margin, more so than BNB, more so than Ethereum, a lot of much larger ecosystems. That's, I'd say, the big wedge that Sei has when it comes to typical users, people that don't even know that blockchain is behind the scenes. That's one big area and big win. And then on the complete other side of the spectrum, Sei has won some of the largest institutions. So Apollo was recently announced, one of the largest PE firms in North America. And a lot of the ecosystem infrastructure, so Metamask, Etherscan, the things that people need to use if they really want to be on chain. So it's all of the dominoes have really gotten in a row. That's been the theme of 2025, and it's just a matter of making sure the right opportunities and the right tokens sort of sit on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the L1 space is competitive, to say the least, as well. So I'm really curious to hear from you when it comes to standing apart. And as you've mentioned there, particularly in the gaming industry, and I used to work at Coin Bureau, and we would constantly review different L1s. And from a retail perspective, you're right, the Sei ecosystem for gaming particularly is a really strong hold. So why do you think that you have such a kind of advantage or clutch for new retail users, particularly in the gaming ecosystem? And what kind of things set different L1s apart from each other?
Yeah, that's one of the most common questions I get. Why does a builder choose Sei over Solana, over Ethereum, over Sui, like each of the different alternatives that they could have? I'd say, the differentiator for Sei really comes back to the initial vision, the initial product. We had a very simple thesis when my co-founder and I got started. We believe that the core value prop of crypto is trading and exchanging digital assets, some sort of financial transaction. And that's it. So much other stuff I think gets talked about, gets marketed, but a lot of that stuff I'd say is much more noisy than it is in real substance. Users use crypto to transact some sort of digital asset. So, if you believe that the most important problem in crypto is building infrastructure to allow financial transaction to scale, there's only three things that matter in that world: cheap, fast, and secure.
Yeah.
That's what all people care about. That's what all the institutions fundamentally care about. And I think it's really easy to get distracted with all of the other metrics or things that an L1 can really focus on. Sei's done that, I think, exceptionally well. Kept things simple, kept the user experience simple. It's being able to combine the best of Ethereum, which is the coding language, the development framework. Everyone already knows it. With the biggest strength of Solana, which is the speed, the performance, the fact that you can send a transaction and it comes back almost instantaneously. So that tends to be one of the reasons why Sei has really won over the last 2 years.
Fantastic. And it's always also helpful to hear you break it down. Next, if we look at, you mentioned some of the kind of the highlights of this year, 2025, and it's been institutional interest. And you've mentioned kind of Apollo management from a kind of private equity perspective too. And I'm curious to hear from you because we have had institutional conversations and narratives have really ramped up this year. It's been a theme that we've had at this conference over the last few days. What do you think is really driving institutional interest right now? And what kind of trends are you particularly noticing within the industry?
Yeah. When it comes to a lot of the institutional adoption thus far, it helps to look back and really try to understand the priorities of any given institution. What fundamentally matters. Institution defined in a very simple way is a group of individuals or some kind of company that manages the wealth of some other sort of group or entity. So this can be, in many cases, like a school endowment. This can be wealthy, like family offices, just wealthy individuals. They pile their assets with some asset manager. That's the institution. Yeah. The job of every institution is to take a certain set of assets or wealth and grow it. They just need to make more money in simple terms. And that still ends up being the core incentive for a lot of the adoption in crypto today. This is now a proven category for institutions to make more money in. Some of the ways that ends up translating to some of the benefits it brings users in crypto is greater access. I'd say that was one of the big vision points of why we even got started at Sei. I spent several years at Goldman before doing classic investment banking, then spent a lot of time at a large hedge fund called Cotu. So we've invested in a company behind TikTok, we've invested in Stripe and some of the largest companies on earth. And you learn pretty quickly that a lot of those attractive investment opportunities are only accessible to folks and companies that are already wealthy. And most of my colleagues, my friends, typical people never get the access to those opportunities until it really reaches public markets. And that kind of access, I think, is one of the big sort of positive bellwethers of the institutional adoption.
And if we go back to the kind of the trifecta of the kind of L1 competitive landscape, and you've mentioned kind of speed, scalability, what are some of the priorities that institutions focus on when looking for a blockchain to invest in? And what kind of, is it different to retail and what we might see as users?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest difference when it comes to institutional priorities and how that compares with users is security. Institutions just care much more about the security piece than your typical user. I think a lot of users in crypto really end up anchoring on the speculative piece. Like they're excited because they think there's a lot of financial upside still. They're early enough. They want to identify new types of assets and tokens, and that's explains so much of that rise in even early Ethereum with the ICOs, as well as you saw that play out again with Solana and all the different meme coins you could purchase. We saw that with early Sei as well. And obviously that's the big sort of milestone for the ecosystem is, are there unique assets that people can really purchase? The game with institutions is completely different. They care about security first and foremost. And that's one of the big benefits of being EVM and combining that Ethereum part of what I said on the best of Ethereum and Solana. Ethereum's proven, it's been here the longest. The language has been defined and is familiar to a much, much larger group of builders. What that tends to mean is a lot of the applications that get built can be that much more battle tested.
And when it comes to other trends as well that we are noticing and seeing, tokenization is a really big talking point, and the potential is unlimited, but we're just starting to scratch the surface. And one of those kind of subsurfaces is real world assets. And I'm curious to get your take on what you see as trends in the tokenization space, and also where we can see the opportunities for real world assets on chain. And if you have a particular subcategory that you can envision as being a great use case to share with our audience.
Yeah. So I think, one of the things about RWAs and about tokenization that tends to get passed over, especially in mainstream media today, people always flock towards institutional RWAs, taking something that already exists as a financial product in traditional finance, moving it on-chain. I'd say the benefit of taking a product that already exists and moving it on-chain already has a market, right? Like if you look at Wall Street, if you look at traditional financial industry, there's already a very fluid market of moving these financial products back and forth. The value prop of crypto tends to be a bit more incremental. It doesn't completely change the game because the market already existed for these assets. Where I'm most excited for RWAs in general, it tends to be new types of products where the market doesn't exist. So, the example that I'd say is quite pertinent on Sei is within sciences and healthcare. Are there new types of assets that can come out of DeSci and sciences that historically didn't have a market, either because of regulation, either because it was just gate kept by large companies that wanted to kind of eat and continue to keep all the profits? That's where you'll see by far the most disruption because the market just didn't exist. And crypto always has this beauty of allowing a free, permissionless, open market to exist for a ton of different types of products that didn't exist before. We saw this with NFTs in 2021. We've seen this with meme coins. We've seen this with the ICO boom. It's a new kind of asset that didn't exist before that now has this sort of free-flowing market. And a lot of these markets are on Binance, right? That's I'd say one of the more unique skews that Sei is taking as an ecosystem, taking that bet that most other L1s aren't.
Yeah, and it's super fascinating because this is the second time that during these 2 days we've heard DeSci come up as a kind of a trend and something to watch. And also the beauty of blockchain is it shines a light on industries that maybe haven't really evolved or haven't revamped. And also from like a governance perspective too, there's a real way to shine a light and improve that industry. What kind of trends within DeSci, because this is actually something that we've not yet covered on the Binance channel, what kind of trends would you say are something to watch out for, or kind of narratives within the DeSci space?
Yeah, right now, DeSci is very, very nascent within crypto. And it's kind of crazy to say because crypto as a broad industry is still sort of in those early stages of adoption. We're now just seeing like the US really warm up to it, and that's just since the beginning of this year.
Yeah.
And it's that much more concentrated when you have a new industry within crypto that's still improving. And I'd say usually when you look at past new products, the first use case is almost always funding. That was same with ICOs, that was NFTs. There was a funding mechanism. It was a way for a new project that perhaps struggled to raise in traditional markets. They raised capital through crypto assets.
Yeah.
So we've already seen some of those case studies in DeSci. I think there's some adverse selection there. So we'll have that healthy level of experimentation happen in this category as well. But some of the more unique types of assets would be like patents. A lot of the drugs that people take and a lot of the medicines, they're all patented.
Yeah.
But a lot of the revenue flow, let's say when I buy like Tylenol, where does that dollar I spend on Tylenol go? Who ends up benefiting? Usually it's like the same companies that hold the power, that hold the revenue. How can you sort of disrupt that sort of revenue flow, make sure that the money goes to the companies that are able to innovate, that are able to continue drug development and help address some of the biggest diseases that we have today? That's, I think, one of the more disruptive new types of products that can come out that is separate from just basic fundraising.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. It's always so pleasant to see these blockchain disruptors as they come into play. If we move out of DeSci and then just more into a kind of a broad ecosystem level for Sei, but also I think agnostically, if there's other things within the industry that you're noticing as trends, what kind of trends are you really expecting to see in the next 6 to 12 months that are emerging, that are ones to watch, and that particularly within Sei's ecosystem, you're really excited about?
The prevailing trend today tends to be stablecoins.
Yeah.
I think it makes sense, in put in simple terms, the US government in general has a big incentive to drive the adoption of stablecoins, both in terms of dollar denomination. You want more people and more companies and countries to just rely on the US dollar versus any other currency that exists.
Yeah.
And also most of the stablecoins, the dollar underlying that stablecoin, like within Tether, Coinbase, and USDC, goes to purchasing a treasury bill. And it's in the U.S. interest to have more demand for their debt. That's what a treasury bill is. So all of the tailwinds obviously fall behind stablecoins. I'd say a trend that I'd say is much less discussed tends to be broader global consumer use cases. So because when a lot of companies look at crypto adoption, they always look at their case studies, like the companies that they view to have higher standard for evaluation. And the example that is pertinent in Sei's case is the state of Wyoming is arguably one of the most crypto forward legislative bodies in the world, but particularly in the US. They're exploring launching their own stablecoin. And as part of that, the natural question is, all right, do we launch stablecoin on Ethereum, Solana, Sei? What are the L1s that make sense? So they developed their own sort of evaluation framework and how they looked at each of the L1s and Sei beat Ethereum and Solana, something that I'd say the ecosystem is very proud about.
Yes.
I would anticipate a lot of companies will look at that same evaluation framework, especially since it's already been signed off by all of these regulatory bodies. They have precedent.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that matters the most for a lot of large companies. So there are going to be a couple big announcements that will happen in this ecosystem that I can't quite share now, but they involve some of the largest global consumer companies that exist. And how can you really integrate crypto and the crypto applications into the things that we get used to on a daily basis, right? What we see on our iPhone, what we see on our laptop. That's one of the sort of big trends that isn't really talked about yet, but we'll likely to see major jumps in over just the next 6-12 months.
Yeah. And it sounds like for you, it's more of that rather than just adoption of digital assets, it's a harmonization of the digital asset space with different subsectors from healthcare, from, as you've mentioned, state-led stablecoins, which is really fascinating. So it seems that there's a different approach for the industry and a merger between the two.
Yeah, I think harmonization is an excellent way to describe it. The same thing happened with traditional technology and software as well. It started off very much focused on the financial component, a lot of like pure software. And over the last several decades, we saw technology imprint and really break into every possible category in every industry that we're familiar with. Now it's, a component of every traditional industry, like groceries, logistics, healthcare as well. It's very, very much ingrained. I'd say that's that next big step. Stablecoins is that sort of early trend and early first milestone for companies and institutions. The next one is going to be actually integrating it into their products. So it's not just a sort of separate stablecoin and payment system. It is a fundamental part of how their products operate.
It's such an exciting time. Well, thank you so much for your time today, and we will keep our eyes peeled for the upcoming announcements as well. But thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for the convo.
Thank you.